Hello everyone, welcome back to the Steam Completion Challenge. This is a challenge in which I am beating each one of the games in my 1500 plus Steam library. If you're interested in seeing what I've played up to this point, check out the playlist in the description or in the card in the corner. Anyways, on to this episode's game, Portal. Alongside Half-Life, which I have previously covered, Portal is one of the most coveted games from Valve, especially from the 2000s era of the company. When I think of peak Valve, I think about games that came out of the Orange Box in that time frame, mainly Team Fortress 2 as well as Half-Life 2. Portal was released in 2007 within the Orange Box and got its critically acclaimed sequel in 2011. Portal was released to a multitude of platforms over the years, with an estimated 4 million units sold. That's not even including on Steam. This game has a huge following, and has some very intricate lore which connects itself into the Half-Life franchise as well. In terms of the lore, I'm not going to be covering much outside what is explicitly happening in this story. There are plenty of videos that go into extreme depths of the lore in the world, so definitely go check those out if you're interested in learning more about that. With that stuff out of the way, let's go over the gameplay of Portal. In terms of gameplay, Portal is at its core a first-person puzzle game. As the name suggests, the main tool for completing puzzles within the game is portals. The player gets a hold of a portal gun and is able to create up to 2 portals in which you can enter or throw objects into. What is really cool about this game is the physics that is associated with the portals. If you were to jump into a portal on the ground and have the other portal on the wall, you will get launched forward using the speed that you built up from the initial jump into the portal. This mechanic is definitely one of the main highlights of the game, as well as the puzzles that incorporate the use of the physics in a highly satisfying way. As with Half-Life, this game runs on the Source engine, which people have figured out many ways to break the boundaries and speed of the engine. So there are numerous speedruns and tactics that just shred this game to pieces. For the sake of this playthrough and my overall skill level, I will not be using any of the tactics and exploits to get through the game. With those things covered, now let's go over to my playthrough of the game. As we start a new game, we were released from a cryo slumber. We were free to roam around and mess with various objects, like this toilet. Soon after, we were greeted by an omniscient robotic voice. This voice is known as GLaDOS and will serve as the main guide to the game. After a few introductions and warnings about what's about to happen, we were released from our chamber by an automated portal. With a quick walk out of our room, we make it to the first mechanic of the game, these being cubes. These weighted cubes serve as a platform and a weight, which in this room will activate this button for us. After getting the button down, we are free to ride the elevator, which serves as the end of a given level or puzzle. Each of these levels are separate from one another, and you are not allowed to bring most objects onto the elevator. The next chamber has us wait for a portal to open up to different rooms, which serves to tell us that objects can go through the portals without fail. And that ends that chamber. A lot of the early stages are very simple in nature, and I tended to fly through them without really any problem. One thing I do want to mention is I have beaten this game before on more than one occasion, which for puzzle games, it tends to make the experience more about how fast you can go. My playthrough was about an hour and a half, but this game can be beaten way faster given the right movement and glitches. Anyways, the next chamber gives us the portal gun, our main form of puzzle solving. We are only given access to the blue side of portals and have to rely on GLaDOS to provide the orange side. I flew through the next chamber without any problem whatsoever. In the following chamber, I am given a radio alongside one of the cubes. One of the things I wanted to try was to acquire all the radios, as there is an achievement in doing so. So this started the real test of getting them all while completing the chambers. The following chamber had us grab a few cubes and place them on the buttons, which wasn't that difficult. As we continue through the chamber, GLaDOS infers that she is allowed to lie to us, whether intended or not. The next chamber introduces the energy ball. No, not that one. In this game, the energy ball is a death orb that needs to be placed in the proper outlet. The safest way to do so is by lining up the portals to aim towards the outlet. This mechanic is used in the next chamber as well, alongside moving platforms, which was pretty simple altogether. The next chamber uses the last room and adds toxic sludge at the bottom of the room, which is an instant kill on impact. As I beat the chambers, it is still rather easy to get the radios and bring them to the end. The following chamber is one of the most infamous in my mind, as it is the first impossible chamber. When I first played this as a kid, this is as far as the game went in my mind. I really wasn't able to beat it until years later. Keep in mind though, I was 7 or 8 at the time, but I have seen others struggle with this level in recent years. The main confusion comes from two things. One, GLaDOS saying it's impossible.
To inform you that this next test is impossible.
And two, the cube you need to bring disintegrates through the grid on impact. But of course, after knowing this game later in life, you just have to shoot a portal through the opening and then bring the cube through the way. Some things just get easier with age, as they say. The next chamber introduces another fun concept, the use of momentum. Essentially, you jump off an edge into a portal and you'll keep that speed going out the other end, no matter the angle you're going out of. This section has you do this a couple times in a few different ways, which the hardest part for me was grabbing the radio mid-jump of a portal. I did hit a cool trick shot with the radio at the end though. The next chamber has us use some buttons to move walls and lead more energy balls to their right outlet. After powering up another lift, we can make it to the other half of the portal gun, the orange side. With the addition of the second portal, the player is given a lot more freedom on portal placement and overall speed. In my mind, this is where the game really starts. One portal is good, but having the second one feels complete. I will say that this level's radio was beyond my comprehension, so I had to leave this one behind. The next chamber has us make both portals and fling ourselves up to the top of the room to get a cube to open the door to the elevator. The following chamber is one of GLaDOS's impossible chambers. The main thing here is that you need to get a portal outside of the cube room so you can bring the cube with you to put on a button. Other than that, it is rather doable with an easy-ish cube to get from an energy ball puzzle. The radio here was a lot easier too. Chamber 14 is one of the longest chambers thus far. Many mechanics are in full use here, from the energy balls, toxic floors, cubes, and momentum puzzles. This level can be a good understanding of what comes easy and what is still hard to do per player. For me, it's still the radios. I was able to get this one eventually, but it was starting to dawn on me that these are getting really hard. The next chamber again lets us run free with the mechanics, and also teases us more about this cake we will receive when the test is over. The chamber uses quite a few momentum puzzles that are a bit more technical to pull off than the previous ones. Once we achieve the right energy ball angle, we can move through a toxic corridor, but in my pursuit of happiness, I was unfortunately turned into one of my favorite hitmen.
Stephen Matrix was a hitman. He killed people for a living.
From this point, I was getting even more confused by the required radios. This one in particular really stumped me for a minute, but with enough trial and error I was able to get it awkwardly. The next chamber is an introduction to the automated turrets, which are always fun to knock over. Inside of this chamber, we also see a real decay in the facility, as there is an open section with some leftover supplies that someone must have been using at some time. At least they left behind some cubes to help us get through the rest of this chamber. Weirdly though, GLaDOS refers to us as an android at the end of this level.
Well done, android.
And now it's on to everyone's favorite level, the companion cube level. This chamber relies heavily on the use of the specific cube throughout the entire level. What makes this cube so special, you may ask? Well, the heart of it, of course. It's really nice until you get a peek at another hideout behind one of the walls. The puzzles in this chamber are pretty creative nonetheless, with one of the first puzzles using it to block an energy ball into an outlet.
The Enrichment Center reminds you that the weighted companion cube cannot speak.
Another near miss of this energy ball later, and we were able to move on, but not without grabbing the radio. And in a twist of fate, GLaDOS reveals that we have to destroy the companion cube for us to continue on.
However, it cannot accompany you for the rest of the test and, unfortunately, must be euthanized.
How sad. But I think the companion cube would want us to go on. We are rapidly approaching the end of the experiment at this point, and I have to go through a few more chambers. But this one has one of the more lengthy problems awaiting. That is, the Sentry Room. This room is one of my least favorites, as you have to knock down all the turrets off their pedestals with an energy ball with little to no cover. You also have to get the energy ball into an outlet with little room for error. What ends up being needed from this room is a lone cube to put on a panel, which then makes us do some quick scopes with the portal gun. Honestly, this section of jumps is one of the more fun segments in the late game and is highly satisfying to get in one go. Now it's time for the final chamber. This one isn't too hard. I guess we really are about to go to the city in between. So unfortunately, the cake was a lie. Okay, anyways, GLaDOS did betray us, and now we have to get the heck out of here. Thankfully, we still have the portal gun and can use it pretty comfortably at this point. Speaking of comfortability, check out this cool catch. Pretty neat, huh? Well, as it turns out, this facility is abandoned big time, minus us and GLaDOS. So let's hop into this weighted cube launcher and get out. Well, that didn't quite work out. Back in this previous test chamber, we head back towards the exit, where the elevator is missing. Falling down to the shaft, we can explore more of the behind the scenes of the lab. This area has a lot of hydraulics that we have to utilize to travel onwards. We eventually make it to a room with a ton of lifts that smash into the ceiling. And frankly, I got kind of stuck here for a bit. It took me about 5 minutes to realize you just have to shoot a portal at a wall. I feel like a complete moron. So at this point, GLaDOS is completely mad with us being out of her control. The next notable section is when we climb up on some pipes and have to make a leap of faith above some toxic. The following room is a trap where a ton of turrets are unleashed to blast us. There are a few barrels given as cover, or to knock the turrets over, but for the most part you can just pick them up and throw them. The way out is above a turret. As we continue through the facility, we are still being harassed by GLaDOS. But frankly, at this point, it's pretty tuned out.
It didn't have to be like this. I'm not kidding now. Turn back, or I will kill you. I'm going to kill you, and all the cake is gone. You don't even care, do you?
After pressing a button, a rocket turret gets activated which breaks the glass in front of us. We're able to use the rockets it fires to break things by getting out of its laser. One of the things we have to break is a cube dispenser so we can climb into a vent. I decided that I wanted to bring the cube with me, which pretty much got stuck immediately. And as I left it there to move on, I almost soft-locked myself by firing the wrong portal back below the vent. Essentially, when I was in the vent, I fired a blue portal through a blade to get underneath it, and I needed the cube to get into the vent. When I left the vent, I could not get back up, and I immediately fired another blue portal, which thankfully didn't activate on that wrong wall, or else I would have had a portal to an area I've already been. So thankfully I didn't make a complete fool of myself here, and was able to carry on without a hitch. We end up in a sewer, which is quite gross. So naturally we go up to get out, but to our surprise this ends up being a turret facility which we have to go and knock out all the turrets while some jamming music plays. After fending off the turrets, we use some momentum to go really high and across to the next area, which to our dismay is the final area in our encounter with GLaDOS. She accidentally dropped some sort of module onto the ground before giving us a surprise. This module seems important, so might as well...
You're kidding me. Did you just set that Aperture Science thing we don't know what it does into an Aperture Science Emergency Intelligence Incinerator? That has got to be the dumbest thing that... Whoa. Good news. I figured out what that thing you just incinerated did. It was a morality core they installed after I flooded the enrichment center with a deadly neurotoxin to make me stop flooding the enrichment center with a deadly neurotoxin. So get comfortable while I warm up the neurotoxin emitters.
From here she releases another rocket launcher and proceeds to fire it at us. So like before, we use portals to line the rockets up to fire GLaDOS instead. During this encounter, every time you hit her with a rocket, another module breaks off of her. And all the modules belong in the incinerator, of course. As she goes into madness with each rocket, the modules are put in more difficult places until the final module, Pure Rage, is put out of its misery. And then the machinery surrounding GLaDOS goes haywire, and along with her we get launched to the surface and the parking lot. Thankfully, a nice android sees us assuming the party's submission position and brings us back inside. And in a final sequence inside the facility, we get a nice look at our reward, the cake, alongside the companion cube and more GLaDOS modules being activated until the candle goes out. And that was Portal. Definitely a classic, and one that is replayable. Speaking of replayability, shortly after playing this game to completion, I ran through the RTX version of it as well, which is free to all users who own Portal in their Steam library. The main thing about that version is the enhanced graphics, primarily the lighting, which looks incredible. Other than that, everything else works the same as in the original. One cool tidbit is that in some of the hidden passageways, you can find an RTX graphics card that was left as an Easter egg. The main thing about this version is that you need a higher end graphics card to run it, and it is pretty demanding even with new stuff. I ended up going through the entire RTX version as well. So that's technically 2 games down in one video, right? The RTX version is technically a separate game with separate achievements and all that. Well, frankly, it really is still just one game in my mind. There's a reason why the challenge is 1500 plus rather than the exact amount in my library. Games like this, where it could be separate entries, but don't have enough original content to separate itself from the original source, will just be put in one video, with one of the games being the main focus. Hopefully that makes sense. Anyways, I really do highly recommend you all play Portal at least once in your lives. It is a really fun puzzle platformer with very unique mechanics and physics. If you're still not quite sold, let me tell you about the Steam stats of these titles. As mentioned before, Portal with RTX is free to the owners of Portal on Steam. So if you were to purchase Portal on Steam, it would run you $9.99. You can also get within a few bundles, these being the Orange Box, the Portal Bundle, and the Valve Complete Pack. On most Steam sales, I often see the Portal Bundle, which comes with Portal 1 and 2, usually priced below $5, which is an absolute steal. You can also get the soundtrack and the RTX version from the store for free. Outside of those things, there are not any Steam trading cards available for either game, but there are achievements though, 15 for each title. I believe that they are the exact same achievements for both versions, but I could be wrong. On the original Portal I got 6 of the 15, and on the RTX version I got 5 of 15. The remaining achievements for both were mostly from the advanced bonus chambers and some specific quests that you have to do. Eventually I would like to go through the advanced chambers, but for now I'm happy with just getting through the main game on both. The challenge as a whole isn't to 100% every single game, but to play to the credits, or as close as it will allow to get a better understanding of what a game is about. Anyways, in terms of runtime, I spent about 2 hours per game to complete all the chambers and to beat GLaDOS at the end. It is a bit of a short game, but as I have said, it's still a really good one. Thank you all for watching this episode of the Steam Completion Challenge. If you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing so you can stay up to date on the challenge. I also opened a Patreon if anyone wanted and is able to support my content. Right now, there are mainly Twitch stream VODs, but maybe down the line I can come up with some other goodies exclusively for Patreon members. Anyways, the next episode of the challenge will be on Pac-Man Championship Edition DX+. So please stay tuned for that in the upcoming weeks. Thanks again for watching.